I was talking to Kenny earlier this week, and he was talking about like how the country is a little bit in flux for the wrong reasons, just because they're upset about the results of what happened this past week, which is neither here nor there. I'm gonna say this probably 3 more times during this podcast. There's never been a president in your lifetime that has literally changed the trajectory of what your overall situation is. You have not gone from making $1,000 a week to making $100,000 a week because you pressed the ballot box and the president changed. Any change that really happens in your life is based upon what you do for yourself, with yourself, and for yourself. So with that beginning, let's start now. Industry rule number 4080. Let's go. Say you really love me, baby. Say you really love me, darling. Cause I really love you, baby. So usually every time we start these podcasts, a melody pops in my head. That's kind of like my comfort zone. My kickoff point. And then sometimes I ask the Goju Nation if they know what that song is that I'm singing. And 9 times out of 10, they never know what it is. They like recognize it, but don't know what it is. Anyway, here we are, Goju Nation. My name is Tally. This is Industry Rule number 4080, Season 3, Episode 3. Goju Nation, you're always appreciated and respected. Catch us on all our socials. Don't forget X, Threads, Facebook, IG, and of course YouTube. At GothamJungle, one word. GothamJungle, one word on all those platforms. Don't forget to like us, follow us, share, subscribe, comment to become an official member of Goju Nation. And also, don't forget to hit me up on the comments. You know how I do this qualified, verified, and certified. Maybe there's some topics you want me to kind of flesh out within that vein. We also like to know if you appreciate what we're doing, if we're doing something right, if we're doing something wrong, if the lighting is too dark, if I'm talking too fast. Whatever that is, we just want to get better. We just want to get better. I'm going to start today with Storytime with Tally. As we all know by now, and if you don't, you're an idiot. We lost Quincy Jones recently. And Quincy Jones is probably in the pantheon of the music industry, probably one of the top 10 musical entities that have existed. You kind of probably don't have music as it is today without Quincy Jones' lineage being a part of what happened within that cycle. But I said story time, right? So let me tell you the first time, because I met Quincy Jones twice. First time I met Quincy Jones was, and the executive producer is going to chuckle when I say this, was at the launch of Vibe magazine. Remember Vibe magazine? Vibe magazine, of which Quincy Jones was one of the founding fathers of that magazine. They had a launch party when the magazine for the very, very first episode. And it was literally the block. The line was down the block and around the corner for people to get in. And it was all industry people. It wasn't like a party where you're trying to get in. Like every person on that line worked at a label, a magazine, a newspaper, a major studio, an artist, the whole thing. And they were online waiting to get in to this function. And the way that it was set up, it was almost like going into a museum because you couldn't walk around freely. It was almost like you had to walk 10 steps to 10 steps in and follow the path of where everybody else was going to get through the party. And literally by the time you got into the party and transversed your way or circumambulated your way throughout the whole circumstance, you were done with the party because it probably took you 2 hours to kind of get through everything. So Quincy was sitting down. I want to say he was sitting down with Babyface. I don't remember. I think he was sitting down with Babyface. And basically everybody, he kind of greeted and thanked everybody kind of for coming. So again, he was the exhibit, right? Everybody's trying to come and see what Quincy Jones was doing. So I was there with my pseudo mentor. Kenneth knows who that is. And we're walking together. And I said to myself, I have to say something to Quincy Jones that's going to make him stop. I'm not doing the just shake your hand, thank you for coming thing. If you remember, if I told you the Michael Jackson story, I got to make him stop and talk to me for a little bit. So literally by the time we got on the line, excuse me, if that was 6 o'clock, I'm not lying. It probably was 8:15 by the time we got to get close to Quincy Jones. Now, again, just transversing the line. Again, all industry people, so people are talking to each other because they know each other. So we get up to Quincy Jones, We meet him, he shakes his hand, I shake his hand, and I ask him this specific question. I said, how is Saida Garrett doing and what's she working on right now? That paused him to stop, and I ended up having a 5-minute conversation with Quincy Jones. Who is Saida Garrett? Saida Garrett is the girl who's singing the duet with Michael Jackson on I Just Can't Stop Loving You. She's also the writer of Man in the Mirror for Michael Jackson. So that caused Quincy to say, that's the question I'm expecting to say. And he asked me who I was, and I told him where I worked at, and we just had a very casual, quick conversation about, like, you know, just the status of the magazine and what's it intended to be, because his primary competitor at that point in time was the Source magazine. And I asked him, I said, well, how are you going to be different than Source magazine? He said, well, number one, we'll be more R&B orientated. We won't be so hip-hop orientated. He said, two, we're also going to add more things culturally to the equation than we would if we just did straight music. And that's exactly what Vibe magazine did. And that was me meeting Quincy Jones. After that, probably took another hour and a half to traverse our way out of that meeting. And that was that day, which is a very poignant day in the scheme of things I've been around industry-wise. Second time that I met Quincy Jones was at Quest Records. Quest Records was the record label that Quincy had on Warner Brothers. That's where all the later Quincy albums, Back on the Block, and those albums came from. And Tevin Campbell, if I said it already, was signed to Quest Records. Ironically, not sure how it happened, I don't know if you remember this, Ken, Ali from A Tribe Called Quest was hired as an A&R guy for Quest Records. And he called me alongside him getting the job to kind of just have a conversation about the executive side of things, because I was on that side and he was on the artist side, and now he's on the executive side, and he kind of wanted to get a, what's it like, what should I expect, you know, what things I should look for type of thing. So I went to go see him over at Quest Records, as I wanted to see his new office, see what that looked like in the Warner Brothers building. And as we were talking about the dynamics and the pitfalls and the great things and the side things about being in the business on that side, he basically said, you know, do you want to meet Quincy? I was like, of course I want to meet Quincy. And actually, ironically, Quincy knocked on his door to ask him something about a project they were working on. And then he says, I'm coming right down. And he took me over with him, and we went into Quincy Jones's office, and we sat and spoke to Quincy Jones for another 20 minutes or so about music industry stuff. Now, this one was more of a pointed conversation, because he was asking, and we were discussing like different label dynamics, like what is Quest Records like compared to, say, Atlantic Records or Elektra Records, which was in the same building, by the way, just on different floors. How it's different than being at Def Jam or working at a Jive or working at a Tommy Boy. We had those types of dynamics about their artists and their A&R people, and I kind of gave them a lot of information within that sense. I also let Quincy know that we met before, and I told him we met at the Vibe party, and I told him the question I asked him, he absolutely remembered that I asked him that question. Or he BS'd me and acted like he remembered, just for the conversation, to pacify me. But either way, we had a moment within that conversation, and those are the two moments that I can clearly say happened, and those are my story times for Quincy Jones, a short story time. But yes, I met Quincy Jones. I want to speak about something about the genius of Quincy Jones, because y'all know Quincy Jones from the records or from Michael Jackson, but from a orchestration standpoint, I kind of want to explain to you like what makes Quincy Quincy. There's a song that I recommend everybody listen to called Tell Me a Bedtime Story. Okay, it's on the Stuff Like That album, and it's actually a song that he did with Herbie Hancock. Okay, it's a full instrumental song. But this is what makes Quincy the genius that he is. It doesn't sound like a instrumental song, because each instrument plays a role where they have their place in the song, which almost sounds like a vocal presentation of what they're doing. But that's not the genius part. The genius part I want you to understand is that Quincy Jones wrote sheet music. Okay? And when he wrote sheet music, he wrote every part within the song, not just the piano. He wrote the trumpet part. He wrote the strings. He wrote the drum interpolation. He wrote the clarinets. He wrote the flutes. And when you listen to a couple of his compositions, especially this one I'm mentioning, Tell Me a Bedtime Story, the string composition that flows near the end is nothing short of incredibly hard to do and amazingly creative to do. because literally within each 8-bar refrain, that arrangement goes into a different direction. So for example, it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It may do that the first time, but the second time it goes 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Then the next time it goes 1, 2, 3 and 4. The next time it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3. And I'm just saying that from a layman's standpoint, but from a person that knows sheet music, to write that out to make sure that each part is different and creative each individual time the refrain comes in, and that it's done with strings, and the strings are doing it in a harmony. It's not one violinist. He's got a dozen violinists playing these parts and going back and forth. It literally is just a wonder to observe if you're truly into music theory and composition. And I'm using that as one example of the 1,000 examples he probably has done during his career. See, Michael Jackson wrote, what's that? What's the name of that song from Off the Wall? Is it Shake Your Body Down? It's not Shake Your Body Down to the ground. It's going to hit me in a minute. But the string instrument that starts at the beginning goes, don't stop till you get enough. Thank you very much, Luigi. You get the gold star for today. Okay? Quincy wrote that string arrangement and inserted it at the beginning of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Michael wrote the song, had the arrangement. He did the whole doom, 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 even the talking. But that string arrangement was not there. Quincy wrote that and inserted that into the song. Think about this for 2 seconds. Would Don't Stop Till You Get Enough be that same song if it didn't have that string introduction? And that's strictly music. That's the genius of Quincy Jones. Okay, I'm done. Tell me a bedtime story now. Do yourself a favor. Stuff Like That album, Quincy Jones, Herbie Hancock. All right, Goju Nation, let's get into some qualified, verified, and certified. The Music Industry Relationship Edition. How do we start? With the Q, the Q, the Q, the Q. And here's what's certified. Luigi, you won't like this story, because when it gets to the end, you're going to say, why I didn't think of it this way. You want to know what Nene Leakes, Evelyn Lozada, Sheree Whitfield, Tahiri, Sin Santana, Erica Mena, Jennifer Williams, and all those like that have in common? Now, you and the people in this room probably have no idea who any of those people are, okay? But what they actually are is they are famous reality TV show stars. They've done The Basketball Wives, The Love and Hip Hops, etc., okay? What do they all have in common? Well, I know what the executive producer is thinking right now in his head, because it's the same thing I'm thinking. You know what they have in common? Nothing. They literally have nothing in common. Not with each other, the fact that they exude nothing. That's what they have in common. What do I mean when I say that? Basically meaning that outside of their looks and them living off the status of the men that introduced to this version of the limelight and lifestyle they are in, they have nothing to offer. They have nothing of substance to offer. They don't aspire to build an empire based on their success, just looking for the next TV show that they could be on or the next come up they could come across. They are not practicing medicine or law or science or education or taking this money that they're deriving from these TV shows to go into that direction. They aren't studying or learning a craft that they may be able to improve themselves or pass on to their children. They simply want the best of everything if you watch these shows. Due to them feeling deserving of such, as if they did any of the above, they would willingly, financially, socially, economically, move on to something different. Let me phrase that again. If you say win the lottery, if you will, okay, and you decide that you're gonna go to school or pay for a house for your parents, this, that, and the third, you're not going to stay in the same circumstances you were in. You're going to improve your circumstances, move on to something better within your circumstances. Get a financial advisor to help you with your certain circumstances. Try to set up funds for your siblings and stuff like that. If your parents pass away, the kids go to college, and then kind of want them to be better for what they are and not just live off of, quote, this come up of finance. That's what the famous families do, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. You just can't sit here and say, I'm a Rothschild and live off the money. You have to kind of do something to continue it. Otherwise, the legacy wouldn't continue these hundreds and hundreds of years, correct? Somebody has to do something, right? But that's not how these women look at things, okay? let's take Evelyn Lozada, for example. She's on Basketball Wives. She literally has had 3 significant relationships, 1 marriage, maybe 2 marriages, with a famous basketball player, football player, and baseball player in her life. And let me explain to you how this works, okay? If you're one of these females, once you marry or get involved with a sports player and make significant money, you elevate in lifestyle to being in the best restaurants. You know the maitre d's. When there are events, you know the people at the door. You know the owners or the curators of the museums. You know the people in the know. And you know them because of your access to them due to you being involved with the come up or the athlete or the rapper, whatever the case may be. But what happens when, ready to laugh, when Alex Rodriguez decides he doesn't want to beat you anymore? Okay? Well, you're stuck out there, but you know what you still have? You still got that Rolodex. You still have access to the guy who has the ticket booth at the basketball games. You still have access to that maitre d' at that restaurant. They know who you are. First name basis, by the way, too. You still know how to get to those restaurants. You still know where the special parking space is at certain places, all because you've had that access. But here's the deal. But you don't have the status now because you had the status with whose arm you was on. So here's what they do, okay? And this is where I'm getting to my point of what is absolutely qualified. They will hover around events and scenarios and situations, knowing that they are attractive by nature. And all they're looking to do is hook the next fish. So if Alex Rodriguez doesn't want me, maybe Derek Jeter will. Okay? If Lil Wayne doesn't want me, maybe Rick Ross will. Maybe this one will. And what happens is that because, as I spoke earlier, they have no aspiration to be anything better than what they are, rather than hook on to the next situation, this is their lifestyle. So they go to the restaurants on a consistent basis. They hang out at nights at the special places. They know when this function's coming to town or this event's coming to town. If it's Super Bowl weekend, if it's All-Star, whatever that is, they know how to hover around that because an All-Star weekend opportunity is a double opportunity because it has nothing to do with the event. It has everything to do with who is going to be there and whose eye they can catch so they can be in terms of somebody else. So they end up, so this pattern continues over time, and we'll give this a one-word definition. I call it sponsorship. Okay? So I'm with Alex Rodriguez until he doesn't want me anymore. I need a new sponsor that has status. So I'll go from him and I'll go out with Rick Ross next. Or maybe I'll go out with Diddy. Or maybe it's Leonardo DiCaprio. Or maybe it's the owner of Buffalo Wild Wings, because they're all in these same circles. And that's what they look to do and build those relationships. This is the basis upon which they activate, motivate. And that, my friends, is what is qualified. Females needing sponsorship. Okay? Now, hold on to that, bookmark that. That takes me to the V. The V, which is verified. Okay? We're off the women now, we're on to the men. Okay? When you are in entertainment and you become successful, it breeds a mirage of contempt. Power and status is a very powerful aphrodisiac, especially to women, particularly to women. So when you see any man dating out of his class, a substantially more beautiful woman on his arm, and you look at him, you kind of say, how did he do that? And you say it instinctively, by the way. Men do that instinctively, okay? Just know, okay, clearly that there's a power dynamic involved in that circumstance that they're attaching themselves to, okay? Because power will take anything and make it look attractive, all right? I'm going to pose a couple statements. Please don't get mad at me. This is not to disparage the people I'm speaking about. I'm just going to say something that's going to speak truth. I'm saying with a certain energy to speak the clarity. Okay? Do you think that Lil Wayne will have the stable of baby mamas he has if he wasn't Wheezy? Pause. Let you breathe on that one. What about Rick Ross? You think Rick Ross would have the bevy of women he had around him if he wasn't Rose and had stock and ownership in Buffalo Wild Wings? Hell, I'll give you even a more simple one. You think Jay-Z would have Beyonce if he wasn't Sean Carter, the rapper? Hell, I'm a challenge the women on this call because I know that they see this, okay? In theory, Memphis Bleak is probably physically more attractive than Jay-Z, just organically. But Memphis Bleak doesn't have Beyonce. Because of the power and influence that the other person has in play. Now, again, whatever the dynamic was that they got together, I'm not disparaging that as well, too. I'm just saying from a pure standpoint of apples to apples, just looking at things, I'm just saying what speaks to truth to facts, if that may be. But that's the power aspect of it. And the entertainment list is endless. Now, along with that power, pay close attention, Luigi, is the mirage of perception, okay? Basically what power does, along with the money, it turns you handsome or it turns you attractive, like the examples I gave earlier, okay? Now, let me flip it so you can get the full concept of what I'm saying. How many men have said this phrase out loud or have laughed jokingly in private about this word? I would love to marry Oprah, because it's not about Oprah. But they say it very clearly. I'd marry Oprah, because it's the power dynamic of her having all the money she has. They'll be around the money. They'll deal with her. I'm not saying she's not beautiful either. I'm just saying that the way the concept that's expressed is, you see how she is? I would marry that. And that's exactly times 10 how women view men in power with substance. Okay? Now, once this happened, there's an inherited bias of actually believing you're more attractive than you actually are. So, for example, once you get the screams and yells of women saying, oh my God, some of that bleeds into your DNA, and you actually says, I am good looking. I am attractive. No, they're screaming at your influence. They're screaming at your power. Okay, that's what they're attracted to. But it inherently becomes a DNA thing where, for argument's sake, if you are people I mentioned before, if you have, for argument's sake, had relations with a dozen models, in your head, you're saying, I did this with a dozen models. I must be that guy. It's not reality. It's the perception of the place they're in currently. Follow me? Okay, hold on to that. Now, that contributes to being catnip for the women looking for sponsors. You see what I mean? Okay, because they know that perception in the men exists. So all you have to do, and I'm saying this to make people laugh, all you gotta do is go to the Miami Heat basketball game, be who you are, because remember, you get in free. This is the female. You get in free or you get comped or you're close to the front row because you're either flirty or you're very cool with the guy at the door, right? Or the ticket sponsor. You're doing all that, right? So you're there. All you gotta do is look at Kodak Black. And Kodak Black looks at you and says, look who's looking at me. And then Kodak Black says, wait a minute, I'm cute too. He's Kodak Black. But that's not what he says. He says, I'm cute too. And then the sponsorship person that's looking to be sponsored, okay, is saying, got one, coach. And then she saunters over, tells him what he wants to hear. I don't know what she does that doesn't do within her moral compass, but I'm sure it's something that's compromising to get her in the game. And next thing you know, he has her on his arm and she has a new sponsor. This happens dozens of times every year across the board in the entertainment landscape. Even with people who are famous. That's why you hear about track records of artists who have dated other artists or actors or other actresses, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So now, you with me so far? You got the sponsorship part? Okay? You got the success breeds a mirage of perception and contempt and how they feel about themselves? Okay. Bookmark that. Second bookmark. Okay? That brings me to what's certified. And the C, and that is the inevitable meeting perfect storm of pride and ego. What does that mean? That means that now that we're clear on the first two, okay, these powerful, successful men wouldn't necessarily have this stable of women on their arms or in their mindset if they naturally developed an ego or pride that matches the size of their success. What I mean is that once that perception comes into play, okay, and you see yourself as this certain status, right? You now want to have a lifestyle or a stable or a perception that matches that ego and pride that goes along with that success. So, for example, it's not fundamentally in the entertainment world okay to be a one-woman man. You must have had a few women. You must have had a track record. You must have a punch list of how many people you have conquered, if you will. Vice versa, to say you're even validated to be in this entertainment landscape. Because look at what you're doing. Look how much money you're making. You made this album. You won this many Grammys. You was in this movie. I know this is going on. So you play into that to a certain extent. And each artist in their own vein, or each actor in their own vein, has their level of what that means and what they represent. Okay? If you're a Jay-Z fan, he spoke a lot about what he conquered before he decided to settle down with Beyonce. And actually, he doesn't even perform half of those songs on his shows anymore because they speak to what Beyonce is saying is that was then, this is now. You shouldn't be talking about those things. That's an actual conversation they had, by the way. That's fact. Okay? So now, what does this mean? So you add in the fact that you have this stable to meet your pride and your ego. You add in the fact that there's a sponsorship list of women wanting to be sponsored. Okay? So they all, for lack of a better phrase, and this is the best, nicest way I can say it, they all kind of get passed around. Because the woman doesn't come out of that hamster wheel. Remember we talked about what she won't do? When she should, okay? She should get whoever sponsor her to help her build her business or take her to school or put her in acting classes. But no, they just want the lifestyle. So they stay on that hamster wheel and says, well, who else can provide that lifestyle for me? So they all get recycled, if you will. Okay? Okay. Now, once this gets passed around for a while, then what happens is that when feelings get involved, that's why I said the ego and the pride comes into play. Now it's a list of who scores more points. Who's in the game, but who scores more points? Adding that pride and ego, sometimes we're okay with it, sometimes we're not okay with it. A lot of NBA players were jealous of Michael Jordan because of all the points that Michael Jordan scored, to give an analogy. Although they were in the NBA too. Okay? What also happens too is that sometimes the women that play with the players that played with Michael Jordan now playing with Michael Jordan. Different stratosphere which they want to maintain. That doesn't make the other players happy because they're not getting as many minutes in the game, if I keep the basketball analogy going. Okay? So what happens over time or over years is that what certain people are able to do, others aren't able to do. And they watch and look up as other players are doing it. I hope y'all clearly followed this, okay, Goju Nation, because what I just explained to you, here's the punchline, Luigi, is the anatomy of what the rap beef is with Drake. There are a lot of people that are not okay with the Michael Jordan lifestyle that he has and the women in his stable. Now, they've had women too in their stable. They're just not Michael Jordan. And they may have had some of the women as well, but they went out with Michael Jordan. See, there was a story once that they thought was a beef that ended up not being a beef, that when Lil Wayne went to jail, that Drake actually was dating Lil Wayne's I'm not saying his girl or whatever the case may be, but somebody that was involved with Lil Wayne. And he thought there was going to be a problem between them, which it wasn't at the end of the day, but it is something that happened. And that's something that happens on a consistent basis because of what I said earlier, under sponsorship. Okay? Now, here's where the rap beef thing becomes, I don't get it today. Okay? Historically, when people had rap beefs, whatever it was within these circumstances, there was a winner and there was a loser. And the loser's career was never really the same again. Okay, so when LL battled Kumo D never became as big as LL. When Kumo D battled Ice-T ended up on Law and Order. Okay, Ice-T didn't make smash albums and stuff like that ever again. Okay, same thing with Cannabis, etc. So I'm just using LL Cool J as an example. Okay, but this is why this rap beef is different, and I don't even call it a rap beef. Do you not still Drake all over the radio every day and twice on Sunday? I know Not Like Us is probably going to win Song of the Year, Rap Song of the Year, definitely that. But is Drake somewhere crying in his milk about the fact that he can no longer do shows and he's not on the radio anymore? No, I think, ironically, if you think about it, he still might be being played on radio more than Kendrick Lamar. So I'm not sure what this rap beef is. Now, let me give you the last element of this rap beef of why it's not a rap beef. Again, anatomy of a rap beef is what I just broke down for you. Okay. You know, women like what women like. Men can never tell women what they like. Okay. And I'm going to give you an example because going back to that whole rap beef thing with Kendrick and Drake, are women not going to his shows no more saying, well, Kendrick killed him and not like us, so I'm not going to his show anymore? No, they're still flocking to the show. Okay. Let me give another drastic example of how women are when it comes to music, how they feel about their artists. Okay. Chris Brown has a tour right now. I don't know if it's over, but Chris has a tour. And on his tour, he has this thing where does meet and greets after the show. Have you heard about this? Okay. He does meet and greets after the show that people are paying, you ready? $1,500 a pop to be at his meet and greet. And what they do is they get to sit with him for a little while, take pictures, talk, the whole thing. And these girls are flying and flocking to this. They let him grab body parts, take hugs, the whole thing. And let me remind you guys why this is such a what the F moment. This is the same guy that beat up Rihanna. Pictures included. Proved in the whole thing, right? But I guess women can forgive him, right? That's okay? We can forgive Chris Brown? Why is that? And I'm going to say it in one statement. Because he doesn't look like Kodak Black. That's the real answer. Okay? The reason why Drake is still on radio and he still has his fans is because he don't look like Kendrick Lamar. The reason why these people are getting upset is because they're not Drake. Because the last piece on this anatomy of a rap battle, my friends, is that everybody who had a beef with Drake, name them. Rick, Future, Kendrick, the whole thing, as they were coming up, Luigi knows this, we can point to a record that they were on with him to help them get where they had to go career-wise. He was already there. Everybody else in the world said, you need a record with Drake. And they did the records with Drake. But now we mad at Drake? We didn't say that day. We didn't thank him when he got was. Remember, Maybach Music used to do records with on I got a record that I love called You Only Live Twice off of the Pretty Lover Boy album, I think it is, for Drake, with Rick Ross, Drake, and Weezy. My God, that record is amazing. The record's amazing. But now we just mad at him now. Again, it's because of the perception of who we are, the sponsorship list that people have acquired, and how our ego and pride get in the way. That is the anatomy of a rap beef, Goju Nation. Nothing to do with the songs they recorded. Nothing. Just perception of power. What do you think about that, Luigi? You like that one? I like that one. Got levels to it, right? Levels to it. You have to be in the know. Because I remember when the first Drake beef, when it happened initially, because I remember initially it was Future's mad at him and Metro Boomin's mad at him. And it was a list of people that were upset, right? J. Cole was involved in a certain extent, and it ended up landing at everybody move is Drake against Kendrick. Well, why is that? Because everybody moved out the way saying the only person that could probably compete with him is this. And everybody else is just piled on. Like they mad too. Just not really fair to the overall situation. But have no fear. The females have come to save Drake. Because again, I repeat, you tell me, unless I have an ear deficiency or I'm going crazy, I know I still hear Drake without even trying on the radio 4 times a day. I'm not even looking for him, and I still hear Drake 4 times a day. And that's not me giving a damn. So that's kind of how that plays out. That's the qualified, the verified, and the certified. Okay? All right, got a couple rants here. The executive producer, who's in the building today, made a point to tell me that I must do rants. I'm just repeating what he told me. You gotta do rants because you got to see you as you are and your personality, how you say things, how you break things down. They need to kind of see how you do this. Yo, you know, I got to talk about everything. I get that. But you got to say a couple things just so people know where you stand and how you feel about what's happening so they can see a bit more of your personality. I got one rant today and one reality check today. Okay. Here's the rant. Tally rule. I'm sticking by this. I don't care. Do a close-up on this one. I think you can see my face on this one. I'm dead serious about this one. Okay? If you haven't watched the podcast and you have comments on the reels or stories or anything you see for a minute or less, I will no longer engage in your opinions. Not doing it, not doing it, not doing it. Here is why. Respectfully, for me to fully be present for what your opinion is, respectfully, you must be fully present to have seen the whole podcast. So you can get the context. I am no longer going to allow an opinion on the movie when you've only watched the trailer. Not gonna happen. Tally rule, sticking to it, never bending. That's number one. Reality. I won't call it a reality check, but just the reality of what's happened in this world in the past week or so and how people are feeling and how I feel about what y'all are feeling. Or let me say it differently, what the reality is based upon what you're feeling. I'm reading this because I want to take time to write this. Equality represents all elements, the ups and downs of the realities of life, not just the ones that benefit you. So what happened politically this month, as the women would say to men if men were not okay, get a backbone and stop being a bitch. Figure it out and move forward. I told this environment, my Goju Nation that watches me, that no elected president has ever changed your literal lifestyle drastically. That falls on the individual. There are still plenty of anti-agencies and organizations that have been around for dozens and scores of years that have been against other entities, people, societies, groups, the whole thing. And guess what? We're still here. We haven't had any mass murders from a hate group in this country in a very long time. But bringing it back to the full point, get a backbone and let's move forward. Because if we were in that same situation, or correction, when we are in the same situation, that's exactly, let me slow that down. When men are in the same exact situation and they want to lick their wounds, the women in their life and even the strong men in their life tell them, get the fuck up and figure it out and stop bitching and crying. So I'm saying the same thing, especially under the rule of wanting equality. Cast the socials, Goju Nation, X, Threads, Facebook, IG, and of course YouTube, GothamJungle, one word, on all platforms. Like, follow, share, subscribe, and especially after today, make sure you got your comments in so you can be an official member of Goju Nation and I can see what you think and what you feel. We're now getting to that place and space where you're starting to see how I am. I'm not sure if you like it or not. Don't know if I really care, but that's what we're doing, okay? My thank yous this week go out to Miss Isis, Miss Rashida, Miss Antonia, the Jizza, the executive producer, Kenneth, and of course, the grand architect of the universe. And remember, light and darkness cannot coexist at the same time. So if you choose to be one, choose to be the light. Salud, Goju Nation. We're done.